mic. So yeah, I'm here to chat a little bit about privacy and security, what we're doing, what we see happening next, what we see as problems, what we see as solutions. Given the small group, which I don't like small groups. Please, I'd love questions, comments. Tell me if I'm wrong. Tell me what's dumb. I think that having a bit of a conversation would be lovely. This won't be a terribly long presentation. And I'm hoping that we have some discussion afterwards, in which case I'm going to do that teacher thing when we all have to be at one table. Everybody to the front. This is a new presentation, so also forgive me if it is a amalgam of several. But recently I have been thinking a lot about the Techlash. We're in this very interesting period where everyone is aware of technology, we're worried about it, but we also love it. And that poses a very interesting conundrum. And for me, as a policy wonk, I sit there and I'm like, what can we do from a regulatory standpoint? What can we do from a cultural standpoint? What can we do to help people? And it all for us comes back to people. And that's why I'm here. I am fascinated in the intersection of culture and technology. How is technology impacting culture? How is culture impacting technology? And are those impacts the ones that we want? Recently, I think that we have all come to a societal conclusion that maybe this isn't the tool we thought we were building. Maybe this isn't the tool we want. So how can we do this? How can we do it better? So I've hopped around all sorts of interesting places. I like to say I hop around idealistic tech companies, but most of Silicon Valley is very idealistic, just in a myriad number of ways, which is great. I'm currently at Mozilla. You guys know Mozilla, I heard you talk about it. But we make the browser Firefox. We consider ourselves here as a mission-driven software company. We are owned by a nonprofit foundation. I'm on the corporation side. We're here to save the internet. We're here to save the internet for the people. But Firefox is not the only thing we do. Here we have Firefox Focus, which is this fantastic, very privacy protective, anti-tracking, content blocking mobile browser. It's really interesting to compare the performance. And we're playing with new ideas. How do we make browsers better? And I'll talk a little bit about that in a minute. We also do this, if you like podcasts, it's called IRL. It's fantastic. I get to help develop it, and it's really well done. And I don't like podcasts, so we have something called Privacy Not Included, which is a fun IoT buyer's guide that we put out usually around the holidays, but we did a Valentine's Day edition as well, and it talks about what IoT is doing and what it is doing well and what it's doing pretty badly. My very favorite thing out of this is actually a lot of these companies are doing privacy and security well. And then there are these really interesting outliers, well, maybe not outliers, but folks that just don't know what they don't know. The worst, in my book, is the baby monitor with the hard-coded password of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's just like, oh, well, so you needed a password, right? Step one. But trying to help people understand the impact of the technologies that they buy. We own Pocket, which is a bookmarking service. It also will read to you. It's actually super cool. We acquired it maybe a year or two ago. Let's see, we have some really cool VR stuff and a virtual reality browser that when we released it, I was just like, is this a thing that anybody wants? And it turns out, yes, it's actually pretty cool. So we have Project Things, which is a privacy protective IoT framework that we're trying to help kind of get out in the world as a different model to some of the very, very centralized and opaque frameworks. So check out all of the stuff that no one knows we do, because I think it's actually quite cool. And what we're doing is trying to figure out what is the next big thing. because the browser is a user agent. How can we be the agent for the user in all of these other places? We have, our mission is to create a global public resource in the internet. And today, what that means is I'm going to talk about how we make the internet trusted and how we help people do what they want on the internet and how we figure out what they want without necessarily requiring them to figure it out. So we are in the Techlash. Technology is everywhere. And I am a relatively early adopter. My home has like 4 smart hubs. It has all of the lights. There was a point at which I sat there and I'm like, ooh, I need to charge my keychain. What world am I in? It's a super useful keychain. Whenever I lose my keys, it makes noise and I can find them. Unless I forget to charge it, which happened. So technology is everywhere. And you can make those choices not to have that technology, or in the world that I want to live in is the one where the technology does what we want. So what I'm going to do is talk a little bit about our approach, talk a little bit about the tech, talk a little bit about the reactions of some of the other parts of the industry. And again, if you have thoughts, love to hear them. I think this is actually a relatively, January 2018, we start talking about the Techlash. This is The Economist, relatively conservative, relatively staid, and suddenly we're all going, wait a second, these companies, do they have my best interests at heart? Because my theory is we all love the products. I love Amazon, I love Google, I love Facebook, heavy user of all of them. But do they have my best interests at heart? And how do we make those choices in an effective way? Mozilla cares about privacy and security. Everyone says it. We try to do it. And I think, when GDPR went into force, you got probably 100 emails that said this, right? I care. I am Facebook. I am Pocket. I am Mozilla. We sent one. Because everyone had to do the notification. So there's just a barrage. How do users actually navigate this? We think it should be easier. The Mozilla Manifesto says that privacy and security are fundamental, and we try to translate that into our products and into our advocacy and into our education for people. When we're designing our products, the biggest principle is no surprises. I think that there's the biggest piece contributing to the Techlash is surprises. We all said, wait, Facebook's doing what? Wait, Experian is who? Wait, Uber did what? And these are all products that are useful. There's a reason they exist, but they're also surprising us. So what can we do about that? We start thinking about controls. We have P3P and do not track, that platform mediating the privacy choices for the consumer. And I love that idea. I spent a lot of time trying to develop do not track. Not for Mozilla, but I worked a lot with folks who were at Mozilla at the time. And not real successful. We didn't, P3P and do not track both failed in my mind. There's some very interesting quotes about essentially, well, everybody put this in Internet Explorer. Everybody put the little ticky box in their browsers. And they don't do anything. In no small part because no one can quite agree what they're supposed to do. And I'm happy to talk more about that if there's interest. But I suspect this is a crowd that more or less knows the TNT story. So this, both of these amounted to a huge effort by a number of companies, by a number of people. We all spent years trying to make these effective and implementable and workable for everybody in the ecosystem. And it turned out that, nothing happened. We didn't actually make positive change, which is an important lesson. And I think feeds into some of the choices that we're making as Mozilla and other companies are making as well. One of the things that we're doing is another case study, DNS over HTTPS. So essentially, when you type Mozilla.com, you go to your name server, usually operated by your ISP. It's all in the clear because when DNS, as one of the fundamental standards underlying the internet was developed, we weren't thinking about security in the same way. We translate that into our IP number, and you get the web page. Everything works. Life is good, except for the fact that your ISP can monetize that. Your ISP can do any number of things. They can intercept. They know where you're going, your browser history. So we helped develop DNS over HTTPS at IATF, a number of other companies as well. It's a great project. Amusingly, the acronym is actually DOE. The first time I saw it, I'm like, we're just gonna make Simpsons shows all day. And so instead, we're using an encrypted third-party name server. It's operated by Cloudflare, although we are going to be working with a number of other name servers, just so that users have a choice. Do they trust Cloudflare? Do they trust someone else? Interestingly, I changed my presentation at the very last minute, so I need to check. One of the things that was very interesting to us is we got a lot of pushback from ISPs. In particular, inside the US, ISPs are relatively well regulated in terms of what they can do with their user data. Outside the US, that's different. And there's a very different trust model, particularly in Europe. And a lot of European users who have seen this particular experiment say, wait a second, I don't want an American company with my browsing history. And that's a fair point. If you don't trust American companies, you don't want to use Cloudflare for your name server. We believe that our contract with them is, fantastic. It protects your privacy, it limits what they can do, and we're very comfortable with it. But that doesn't mean that the person behind the browser is. So we need to give them those choices. And we saw a very interesting reaction to that experiment. In particular, this blog post is from a European user saying this is not what I want out of Firefox, and that's an important thing for us to know. And so this is one of the security experiments that we're doing, and we learned a ton. And we're talking to all of these partners, we're talking to these people to see what we can do to make it better. And right now, what that means is finding more partners. We are also, somewhat in reaction to the failure of DNT and other platform kind of multi-stakeholder discussions of privacy and security, developing anti-tracking tools that are really cool. We're not the only company doing that. Safari is also notably doing some interesting anti-tracking stuff, particularly around cookies. Chrome is doing what they call an ad blocker for ads that are relatively annoying, which I think is super smart, but doesn't address the privacy and security concerns. But does address, we were chatting earlier about the stupid autoplay videos, and the interstitials, and all of the things that you're not there to see that. And I support the ad economy. It's important. It's the model that underlies the internet right now. We need that, but the ads can be better, the publishers can be better, and the browser can be better. So we are talking about that. We put out a new anti-tracking policy, I want to say a month ago, because we said, look, we're going to be blocking third parties, we're going to be blocking tracking, and we're going to be blocking pixels. But now we're talking about all sorts of other things, because there's a lot of ways to track a user, some of which we don't know how to detect yet. We're working on it. The team is fantastic. And tracking is used for literally everything. We all need it. It's important. Like analytics and measurement is important. Knowing who your audience is important. But then we're creating the internet ecosystem. We aren't. It's creating these ubiquitous profiles that follow you around. And sometimes that's great. Sometimes it's super annoying. I actually like targeted ads. I am, part of there are demographic breakdowns that are fascinating about that. And I buy stuff off of them, and they're great. And then the stupid shoes keep following me around. And it is actually interesting. The shoes I'm wearing, I call them my internet shoes, because I got them on the internet. They follow me around everywhere. But most women, especially if you use Facebook, have seen ads for these shoes. And I get people who I don't know walking up to me and going, oh, are those shoes? And they've seen them and they wonder about them because the ads are actually pretty compelling. And I love them, but I'm sick of the ads. And so one of the things we're doing is starting to block more things that we know are used for tracking and not content. We work with a company called Disconnect, who curates this list of trackers that don't add value to the user. And so something like a YouTube embed gets through, but something like a tracking pixel that feeds back to, I'm gonna blank on an example name, but some ad tech company that's just throwing the data around isn't gonna load. And we think that that's actually better for users. So we are changing some defaults. We're working with a ton of partners to see what that impacts. And the mildly snarky way that I say it is we want to make sure we're only breaking the things we want to break. And there's been a ton of learning there too. We are going to roll that out by default soon, but right now it's just an experiment. About 2.5% of our users see it. And we're waiting to see what breaks. And we're getting real close to where we're comfortable. Firefox Focus, which I mentioned earlier, is an early experiment on that front. It blocks everything by default, except for content trackers, and that's a measurement thing. And that is fascinating because we're seeing the performance of web pages improve drastically, which tells us that all of these third-party services are slow. They are annoying. They are tracking you, and they are using up your bandwidth. All of those are bad things. So hopefully, we develop those products in a better way, and then they're not annoying, and they don't track us, and they load faster. And that is a good outcome for everybody, I think. I think that is how we save the internet. But who does the anti-tracking impact? Literally everyone. It's the publishers, it's the ad techs, the advertisers, it's the users. Hopefully, everyone goes towards a better place. Safari has also done this, as I mentioned. They have a different approach. It's very cookie-based. I would be surprised if they stay with just cookie-based. And hopefully everyone moves forward. And if we don't, ad blocking is just going to go up. It is going up. We're seeing all sorts of very interesting approaches to this. I think that it's one of those things, you install an ad blocker, you never have to think about it again. And if it's a good ad blocker, it only, again, breaks the things it wants to break. Sometimes that's not true. Sometimes your web page just doesn't work. But ad blocking is scaring publishers, and it should. If their model is ads, then ad blockers are going to impact them and are impacting them. I believe that the solution there is, if you want advertising, it should be good advertising. It should be well crafted. It should be respectful to the user, and then they don't install the ad blocker. And we've seen that. But there is a bit of a panic. Are we killing the internet or are we saving it? We believe there are also other models that aren't dependent on ad tech intermediaries and, again, throwing all of that information around. We have advertising in our new tab page. It is very curated. It's partners that we trust, that we have strong relationships with. It's folks like the Wall Street Journal and other major brands. For now, it's an experiment. We've seen some reactions that people don't like it. You can turn it off. But it's intermingled with high-quality content from Pocket. And we think that we can deliver value there. But what about the policy developments, which is, I span both worlds, both the technical and the policy. And what we're seeing globally is a huge reaction to the Techlash. We have the EU's GDPR. We have Kenya's data protection bill. We have one in India. We have one in Brazil. We're talking about it in the US. We're talking about it in Indonesia and Malaysia. We are talking about it in Australia. And hopefully we can come to a consistent solution around the world that allows the internet to remain the amazing resource that it is. But we're working on that. Mozilla has folks on the ground globally working on these laws. I personally am spending a huge amount of time on privacy law in the US. And hopefully, fingers crossed, Congress can be a little bit functional and pass something. Yeah, I'm a little worried. But that's a 2 or 3 year goal. That's going to take some time. These laws, if we crack them well, are hard. And they should be. This is a hard problem. So at the end of the day, technology companies have locked this sector into a corner, and we need to walk back. We need to say, wait a second, I'm not respecting the user. My tool isn't doing what we wanted it to do. My data is places that I didn't expect it, and start respecting the user and thinking about how to get out of the Techlash. No one wants this. This isn't the tool we wanted to build. And we, as Mozilla, are here to help. And we want ideas. We want thoughts on how to better craft these tools. We want help crafting better standards and more privacy protection to help users get what they want. So that is the talk. I'd love thoughts. I was hoping that this would spark a discussion. What can we do, both on the policy side and the tech side, to really help the technology sector save itself?
I have a question.
Yes.
I'm also a policy nerd.
Excellent.
I think you're right that the feds are going to try, but what I'm worried about is, what I think is probably going to happen is that it's not going to happen before January 1 when the CCPA goes in.
Oh, I forgot to mention California.
Yeah, right, California. So that's going to happen on January 1. Washington State's doing the same thing. So is New York. So is a couple others. So if the feds don't get their shit together, frankly, in the next 6 months, then what, right? Then the U.S. is in this weird patchworky kind of thing. And what do you think happens, right?
We're going to have a patchwork. It's going to be difficult. And
Yeah.
It's going to be hard to comply with. I think everyone is right to panic a little bit.
Yeah.
And also, maybe this actually drives positive change. I would bet a huge amount of money we do not have a federal privacy law by January 1.
I agree.
And at the end of the day, there's the number of people working on this is fantastic. And there's a ton of smart people. In the last 5 years, we've got technologists working in Congress. We have congressmen who have, and women, who have significant expertise in tech, including coding backgrounds. And that changes the game for the better, but not 6 months fast. I think what happens is we spend, the same way that companies have spent a lot of time, money, resources complying with GDPR. They're going to do the same thing for California because they have to. And I think we're going to see the same kind of wait and see out of California. GDPR is not end of the world. I don't think the CCPA will either. I do think that it will get very interesting as we start fragmenting state by state. And I do think there is significant energy in Congress. I'm waiting for a good baseline bipartisan bill to come out. I believe there is one, and one that I can support. But I'm waiting for that to come to fruition. And right now what's happening is we're also getting a bunch of federal laws that are piecemeal. There's a data fiduciary bill. There is a facial recognition bill. There is a ISP privacy bill. There is a Browser Act privacy bill. And I think those are the first of many. And so we're just going to run around in circles for a little bit, unfortunately. But I think that we will get something out at the end. And really, if California impacts small and medium businesses, I think that will be interesting. One of the things that I want to do is demonstrate that technology companies don't only operate on an ad business model. We don't. We use advertising. We are a publisher. But that's not our source of revenue. There are other ways to do this. And that is one of the things I hope comes out of this is folks with a different business model say, wait a second, my life is easier than your life. And we'll see how it goes. So. Other thoughts? Any more coffee?
Yeah, I guess so. I have two questions. Maybe I'll start with the, let's say, easier one, which is, I think, affecting the policy side of things. So we're in a state in 2019 in which a user generally visits a website and they're basically confronted with that horrendous cookie slash policy
Right.
slash
like
whatever
that either.
setting, which they completely ignore, of course. The last thing that they have in their mind is to read all the implications of what they're doing. They just want to read the article or whatever. So that's, I think, a huge failure on the regulation side of things.
Yep, I agree.
So, I mean, I don't think anyone in this room basically takes the time to, well, maybe others do. I definitely do not, right? I just get to read the article. So my question is, do you guys push back and do you have any ideas on how to overcome this problem? Because basically the only thing that has changed between 2019 and 10 years back is the fact that now we're just faced with a unknown pop-up. And in terms of privacy and security, nothing basically changed.
Yeah. So the cookie directive was a very well-intentioned failure. Over notification is a real problem, and we are teaching people to ignore notifications. And then we're also pushing notice for privacy and tracking. We did work a lot on the e-privacy regulation to fix that. Forget exactly where that is now. I just know we're not super happy with it. And I think there's an argument for whether when we're talking about this, is it meaningful? There's an interesting concept, and I think it's in both GDPR and some FTC documentation. If it is an expected function, you should be notified. If I'm buying something on Etsy and I give them my credit card, I know that they're going to use it. Like that's exactly what that transaction is, and that's not the kind of thing you need to notify. Now, unfortunately, I don't think that changing that kind of level for context is going to make a big difference because everybody's using like 1 billion records because they're eking out value wherever they can. And if we can change that and make the internet healthier, I think that helps just from an ecosystem point of view. I don't have a great answer on the regulatory side. I want granular and specific consent, and that might be annoying. I want that, but I want that to be better than the cookie bar. And how we figure out how to do that is my project for the year. So
Good luck.
Yeah, right.
I guess another question that I had from more of the technical perspective is that I understand that on the ITF, for example, the Googles of the world basically have an upper hand because they have the resources, and the means to be able to shape technology the way they want. So again, the question is, how do you guys deal with that issue? How do you, well, not necessarily combat it, but how do you address it?
So one of the wonderful things about multi-stakeholder processes like IETF, and I'm going to differentiate. I worked on like DNT and W3C, which didn't work well, but a lot of these processes work really well because we're all working towards the same goal. And we have a ton of folks at IETF that work on IETF, but we're relatively well-resourced as well. We're not at Google, but I think that the model is inherently intended to combat that particular problem. And I wonder, when there's strong arming, there's certainly plenty of protest. The really interesting piece of it isn't, to me, at those multi-stakeholder tables. It is when the Googles of the world move ahead of the standards and start defining them themselves, and then they become a default, and then suddenly they're the standard. A lot of times that's fine, and a lot of times that's actually great. The engineers at Google are wonderful. I love working with them. But if we start seeing anti-competitive moves there, we're going to talk about it. And there's some very strong antitrust enforcement folks globally that will probably be very interested. So that is my thought. That is a bit of a different kind of strong arm.
You mentioned about the fourth principle about the other three,
principle.
Mhm.
The second question is that we are kind of moving beyond the browser.
Yeah.
Going to IoT and tracker even. We don't even know. What is the thought about?
I'm going to pull up the Mozilla manifesto. Because it's actually, so the manifesto, the principles,
How many of them?
there are 10, and we gave.
No, 10 of them.
We have 10 of them, and we actually added 4 more. And I'll talk a little bit about that.
14 total?
Yeah. So essentially, these principles are talking about, what we want the internet to be. It is essential. It is global. It is a resource. It is for people. It's for creators. It's for people who consume that content. It must enrich the lives of human beings. This isn't just about the technology. Privacy and security. But user agency is really principle 5. And as the user agent, we're very invested in that. Interoperable, and that speaks to the standards question a little bit. We are very dedicated to open source. Firefox is open source. We acquired Pocket, and they started going open source, which is a process. We want to be transparent and participatory. We have a global community with tens of thousands of people who actually help us build this browser, help us with the advocacy, help us with the education, and serve as eyes and ears on the ground. They give us feedback. It's fantastic. And they're very opinionated, which is great. We have no problem with the internet being a commercial space. That's actually great, but there's a balance, and it shouldn't be just a commercial space. We talk about public benefit. That is what we believe the internet is for. It is not just for commercial benefit. And then we added these 4 in an addendum, which is talking about we want the internet to be for everyone. So the principle that the internet is for people didn't actually say, but it's for everyone. And that's speaking to marginalized communities, women online, Gamergate, misinformation, manipulation, election tampering, all of that is part of why we think the internet isn't where it should be. This isn't the tool we meant to build, which is kind of my theme for the year. And so we decided it was important to talk about this and also talk about a healthy internet, because it's not as healthy as it could be. There are a lot of wonderful things about it, but it's not where we want it. So that's the manifesto. We have a bunch of stuff that comes out of it. One of the interesting things is figuring out how to balance those, because some of them are in tension. That's fine. If you want to talk about transparency and openness versus security, that's a hard problem, and one that we've grappled with internally and externally. We've made mistakes, we've made progress, we made both. So that is the first one. What was your second question?
Second question is that what is Mozilla's role in terms of the non-browser-based
Mm-hmm.
some of that IoT and other stuff.
All the apps and stuff?
Not only that, but it also IoT, right?
Yeah,
so
yeah.
now we have this
yeah.
wearable and
Yeah.
all that stuff.
Yeah.
Now it started actually, we're using quite more of that.
No, and people love that. I love that. I mentioned a lot of the connected devices in my home, but the most ridiculous one is literally it's an app that I can use to throw treats at my dog. It's called a Furbo, and I now joke, except it's true, that she worships the Furbo god. Because she sits there and she's like, I would like it, and I love this thing. It is stupid. I never would have said, ooh, build me this thing. But that's part of the importance of the internet. We have all of these unexpected but wonderful things. And we're using IoT and we're using apps. And so suddenly browsers aren't the only way that we're interacting with the internet. And so we are thinking about that a lot. But how do we translate these principles into new and unique places? If my fridge is connected and I don't have an interface to it, what does that mean? That's interesting. If I'm talking, my home is connected via Google Homes. If I'm talking to Google, what happens with that? And I think that there's education and transparency there that are necessary. We're doing a lot of work across both the corporation and the foundation to talk about what those standards should look like, both for transparency and for security. And we're working with folks in our society, Consumers International, others, a bunch of advocacy groups, Consumers Union, to think about what a trust mark would look like. And I don't always like trust marks. I don't like the little seals. They don't mean anything to me, other than someone likes this thing in this box. But I think that in this case where there's no interaction on the back end, or no user interaction with the back end is probably a better way to say it. We need to do a lot more work, and we're definitely thinking about that. And that is one of those places I don't have an answer.
So actually, I have a comment about the manifesto.
Yeah.
I feel that a lot of time, especially the younger, since we start using internet so early on, this information may be useful to educate maybe even middle school kids.
Yeah.
So they know that this is kind of like the bill of rights of the internet.
Yeah. No, and
where they start to think about the use of it, because right now I think most of the time we're just user. When we start as a user, and we tend to be the user, right? But we start saying that internet actually is a tool for us to do a lot of things.
Yeah.
Then we will treat it like a language, like a math, like a science. Then we start saying this is a tool for us to build a better future. And I think that's really important.
I think that is, and I'm a proponent of getting technology into education. I think that it's incredibly useful, and that's the world we live in. If we don't educate kids on this kind of thing, this is what we should expect on the internet, this, they're not going to think about it because it's always been there. And it's not this cool new tool, it's just a part of life. And if that part of life isn't in line with the principles and in line with what we want the internet to be, that's bad. And that's one of those things. I very consciously have shifted my language away from consumers and users and towards people, because I want people to be online. I don't want a consumer. You should be more than that. And that's a little bit controversial. Like, a lot of people get confused by that in a way that's interesting, because companies don't think about people. And that's one of the reasons that all of these, if we're talking about AI and algorithms and the news feed, we weren't being thoughtful about people. We were being thoughtful about engagement with our users. We were being thoughtful about, did they click it? Yay. And then suddenly we've incentivized clickbait. And so at the end of the day, we need to reevaluate what we're designing for and make sure that people are in the mix. I think that companies have figured that out. The Mark Zuckerberg column yesterday was fascinating for many, many reasons. But I think it was an acknowledgement that there was some misguided development. And I get it. Like, if your goal is engagement, if your goal is growth, and that is the thing that you are unilaterally aiming for, you end up with the Facebook we have now, and half the stuff on that page no one wants. But it was an idea, and so we did it, and I guess it's there now forever. And that's one of those places we can do better. I think Twitter is also experimenting with some of that, but figured it out earlier, figured out that they weren't being people-centric earlier. And when we're talking about ad tech, as the browser, we can do a lot in terms of making that interaction more people-centric. And that's what we're trying to do with the anti-tracking work. So it'll take a while. It'll take a lot of people kind of figuring that out and sitting down and saying, we can do better.
And I really encourage you to reach out more to the education, so in other user, because using it is good, but only using it as a tool, I think the power is even greater.
One of the things I have, No, I have a colleague on our marketing team who's very, very focused on that. And actually, right now, our kind of theme for the year for marketing is Firefox Fights for You. And he wants to reframe it as Firefox Fights for Your family. And talking about kids and building a better internet for them and teaching them how to use it. So I think we can do a lot more. There was a tweet maybe 2 days ago about someone whose kid installed Firefox on their school computer and got written up for it because they're not supposed to install other applications for many good reasons. But that's a weird and bad outcome. And so we've been talking about that internally and talking about what we can do to get into schools and help kids. So I love the idea.
Not sure what school district it is, but in other school district, the top 3 is always available. It's a user to choose which one.
Yeah, no, and I think that's smart. And actually telling kids they can't install new things, that they can't use the tools they want, that's a bad outcome. And so figuring out how to give schools the support that they need, and whether that's IT support, whether that's education, whether that's new tools for their use, is certainly on our mind.
But it could be a good marketing. So.
Yeah, no, I think so.
Because the more you tell the kid not to do, the more they want to do it.
That's fair.
The next, great forces of using, Firefox. By telling them
That's a
don't use
marketing
it.
campaign we're never going to run. Hey kids, don't stop.
Don't use Firefox. Please don't use it.
Safari's great, guys. Awesome. That's funny. Now that I'm gonna go to the office today, and I'm like, hey guys, I love it. So, any more questions? Coffee? Snacks? All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.